My name is Daniel, I'm 52 years old, and for the last 3 decades, my hands have been my life. I'm a custom furniture maker and carpenter, a trade I learned from the ground up. But the most important thing I ever built wasn't a cabinet or a house, it was a life for my son, Alex, whom I raised by myself since he was 2. This past weekend, I attended his wedding. I should have been the proudest man in the room, the father of the groom. But according to the elegant, calligraphed place card at my assigned table, tucked away by the service entrance to the kitchen, I was someone else entirely. My nameplate, in delicate gold script, didn't say a father of the groom. It said, Daniel Miller, low-educated guest. The moment I saw it, a cold, heavy stillness settled in my chest. It was a calculated insult, a final, public declaration of what my new daughter-in-law and her wealthy family truly thought of me. And in that moment, I knew that the wedding gift I had planned, the culmination of 30 years of sacrifice, a secret I had guarded so carefully, was about to become something else entirely. It would no longer be a gift. It would be a lesson. Before I continue with what happened at that wedding reception, the moment that changed everything for me and my son, I want to ask you something. Drop a comment below, hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever poured your entire soul into someone, only to be made to feel small, to feel like you weren't enough. Your story matters, and I want you to know you're not alone. The story of that nameplate didn't begin at the wedding. It began 30 years ago, in a small, empty apartment that echoed with the silence left behind by a woman who decided motherhood wasn't for her. My wife, Leanne, left a note on the kitchen counter that was as brief as it was brutal. She was young, she wrote, and she couldn't be tied down. In the crib in the next room, my 2-year-old son Alex was sleeping, blissfully unaware that his world had just been fractured. I remember standing there, the flimsy piece of paper shaking in my hand, and making a silent vow to that sleeping child. I would be enough. I would be his mother and his father. I would build a world for him so full of love and security that he would never feel the peace that was missing. It was a promise born of desperation and a fierce, primal love that I didn't even know I was capable of feeling. The first few years were a blur of controlled chaos. I was a young carpenter, working for a large construction firm. The days were long and physically punishing, and the nights were short and punctuated by teething, fevers, and nightmares. I'd come home covered in sawdust and paint, my muscles screaming, only to start my second job, fatherhood. I learned to braid hair, pack lunches, and navigate the treacherous world of parent-teacher conferences where I was always the only dad in a sea of moms. There were whispers, of course. Judgments from other parents, pitying looks from neighbors. They saw a rough, blue-collar man struggling to raise a son alone and they drew their own conclusions. They didn't see the nights I spent reading Goodnight Moon until my voice was hoarse. They didn't see me meticulously saving every extra dollar, not for a new truck or a vacation, but for a college fund that seemed impossibly far away. They didn't see the gut-wrenching guilt I felt every time I had to miss a school play or a soccer game because a foreman demanded overtime. I always tried to make up for it. If I missed the game, I made sure I was there to celebrate the win or soothe the loss afterward, with ice cream and a listening ear. I taught Alex how to ride a bike, how to hammer a nail straight, how to treat people with kindness and respect, regardless of their station in life. I poured everything I had, every ounce of energy, every spare moment, into that boy. He was my purpose. The world outside our small, rented house could judge me all it wanted, but inside those walls, we were a team. I was his foundation, and he was my reason for building. As Alex grew, so did my ambition, fueled by that promise I made all those years ago. I saw the world changing. I saw that a university education was becoming the key to a future I could never have. I wanted that for Alex. I didn't want him to have to break his body just to make a living. I wanted him to use his mind, which was sharp and inquisitive even as a boy. But that kind of future required money, far more than I could ever make working for someone else. My mentor at the time was a man named George, the owner of the construction firm. He was a tough, old-school builder who had seen it all. He saw something in me beyond just a reliable worker. He saw the way I studied blueprints, the way I cared for my tools, the way I could solve complex structural problems that baffled other guys on the site. One afternoon, after I'd stayed late to finish a particularly tricky piece of trim work, he called me into his office. He looked at my calloused hands. "Daniel," he said, his voice raspy from years of shouting over saws, "your hands are smarter than most people's brains. You've got an artist's eye and an engineer's mind. Why are you wasting it building cheap tract homes?" That question lit a fire in me. With George's encouragement, and a small loan he personally guaranteed, I started my own business out of my garage. It was just me, a used table saw, and a handful of hand-me-down tools. I called it Miller & Son, even though Alex was only 10 at the time. I started small, building custom bookshelves and cabinets for neighbors. The work was grueling. I'd put Alex to bed at night and then head straight to the garage, often working until 2 or 3 in the morning under the bare light of a single bulb, drafting designs, cutting wood, sanding, and finishing. My success was a secret kept between me, my sawdust-covered garage, and the growing balance of Alex's college fund. To Alex, and to the world, I was just his dad, the local carpenter. He knew I had my own business, but in his mind, it was a small, humble operation. A dad in a dusty workshop making furniture. I never corrected him. I never boasted about the contracts that started coming in, first from local designers, then from high-end architectural firms in the city. My reputation for quality and precision grew quietly, by word of mouth. I built a state-of-the-art library for a reclusive author. I designed and constructed the entire bar and interior woodwork for one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. I was making more money than I ever dreamed possible, but my life didn't change. I still drove the same pickup truck. I still lived in the same modest house, which I'd eventually bought and renovated myself. Every spare dollar, every profit from every job, went into a series of investments, a carefully managed portfolio that I learned to build by reading books from the library late at night. It was all for Alex. It was his future. My secret wasn't about hiding wealth, it was about cultivating a dream for my son, a dream he didn't even know was possible. The return to the present day was a jarring collision of my two worlds. The moment Alex announced his engagement to Victoria Henderson, I felt a tremor of unease. I had met her a few times. She was polished, beautiful, and carried an air of effortless superiority. She came from old money, from a world of country clubs and Ivy League legacies, a world that had no concept of the one I inhabited. Her parents, the Hendersons, were even worse. At our first meeting, a painfully awkward dinner at their palatial home, they looked at me with a kind of polite curiosity one might reserve for a museum exhibit. "So, Daniel," Mr. Henderson had said, swirling his wine. "Alex tells us you're in construction? You work with your hands?" How quaint! The word quaint was dropped like a little stone, creating ripples of condescension throughout the evening. I tried to be gracious, for Alex's sake. I saw how happy he was, how completely smitten. He was a newly graduated doctor, his entire future ahead of him, and he was in love. Who was I to stand in the way of that? But as the wedding planning progressed, the slights became more frequent, more pointed. Victoria would talk about her family's vendors, the world-renowned florist, the Michelin-starred caterer. When I offered to build a custom archway for the ceremony as a gift, she'd smiled thinly and said, "Oh, that's so rustic of you, Daniel. But we have a designer for that." It was a gentle but firm dismissal, a way of saying my contribution, my craft, was not up to their standard. The escalation reached its peak during the wedding weekend itself. At the rehearsal dinner, held at an exclusive golf club, I was seated at a table with distant cousins of the Hendersons. Not with the main family. Not with my son. I watched Alex at the head table, laughing with his new father-in-law, looking every bit the part of the successful young doctor who had married into wealth. He looked over at me once or twice, a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he never made a move to include me. Later that night, my phone rang. It was Alex. His voice was strained, hesitant. "Hey, Dad. I just wanted to talk about tomorrow." The seating chart, he stumbled over his words, the way he did when he was a boy and had to confess to breaking something. "It's just Victoria's mom is very particular about an aesthetic. About how things look. The nameplates. They're very formal. I knew what was coming. I held the phone, my knuckles white. What about the nameplates, Alex? It's just a little card, Dad, it doesn't mean anything, he rushed on, his voice getting higher. They just put your name. They didn't know what to put for your job title, so they just kept it simple. It's not a big deal, okay? Please don't make it a big deal. He wasn't telling me the whole truth. He was hiding what it actually said. But in his desperate, pleading tone, I heard everything. He was embarrassed by me. And he was too weak to defend me. The son I had sacrificed everything for was asking me to quietly accept being disrespected at his own wedding. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex, I said, my voice dangerously calm, and hung up the phone. The deal was sealed. My gift would no longer be a celebration of his future, but a judgment on his character. The day of the wedding arrived, cloaked in a perfect, sunny sky that felt like a mockery of the storm brewing inside me. I put on my best suit, a custom-tailored piece I'd had made for the occasion, a quiet testament to a success they refused to see. My partner, Sarah, a kind and brilliant schoolteacher who saw me for exactly who I was, stood by my side, her hand a warm, steady presence on my arm. She had witnessed the subtle digs all weekend and her eyes were filled with a protective fire. We walked into the grand ballroom, a symphony of white flowers and crystal chandeliers. And there it was. Our table. Number 23. Nestled in a lonely corner between a service hallway and the booming speakers of the band. And on the table, the two small, elegant cards. Sarah Jenkins and next to it, Daniel Miller, low-educated guest. The word seemed to lift off the card and hang in the air, sharp and poisonous. Sarah gasped softly and squeezed my hand. Daniel, she whispered, we don't have to stay. I looked at her, and then across the room at the head table. I saw Victoria, a vision in white, laughing with her father. I saw Alex, my son, catch my eye for a fleeting second before looking away, his posture stiff with shame. No, we weren't leaving. I wasn't going to run. I had been building towards this moment my entire life, I just didn't know it. The dinner was an exercise in surreal detachment. We ate the exquisitely prepared food, listening to the drone of polite conversation around us, the nameplate sitting there like an accusation. Then came the speeches. Mr. Henderson stood up, a champagne flute in his hand. He spoke glowingly of his new son-in-law, Dr. Alex Miller. He praised Alex's ambition, his remarkable intellect, and in a line that lanced through me, he toasted to Alex for so brilliantly overcoming his humble beginnings. The room applauded. Then, the MC announced, and now, a few words from the father of the groom, Mr. Daniel Miller. A hush fell over the room. I saw a flicker of panic in Victoria's eyes. This wasn't on her carefully curated schedule. I walked calmly to the stage, carrying the leather briefcase I had brought with me. I adjusted the microphone, my gaze sweeping across the sea of expectant faces until it landed on my son. Good evening, I began, my voice steady and clear. My name is Daniel Miller. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alex's father. But according to my place card, I'm just a low-educated guest. A wave of murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Victoria's face went white. Alex looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. It's true, I continued, I don't have a university degree. My education came from a dusty workshop, from splintered wood and the sharp bite of a saw. It came from 30 years of raising a boy on my own and making a promise to him that he would have every opportunity one never did. I paused, letting the words sink in. Alex, I am so incredibly proud of the man you've become. A doctor. Your mother. She would have been proud, too. I then placed my briefcase on the lectern and clicked it open. I pulled out not an envelope with a check, but a large, rolled-up set of architectural blueprints and a thick, leather-bound document. I've always tried to provide for you, son. I paid for your college and your medical school. You thought that money came from my small, humble carpentry business. You were right, it did. You just never knew the scale of it. I unrolled the blueprints. They were for a state-of-the-art medical clinic. This was to be my wedding gift to you and Victoria. The Miller Family Health Clinic. Fully funded, fully equipped. A place for you to start your practice, debt-free. A collective gasp went through the room. I then held up the leather-bound document. And this is the deed to the custom home I had built for you on the adjoining land, designed by the same architects who contract my quaint little company to do woodwork for luxury hotels and corporate headquarters across the country, firms, Mr. Henderson, that I believe your own company holds in its investment portfolio. The shock on their faces was everything. It was utter, complete, and devastating. My gaze moved from the stunned face of Mr. Henderson to his daughter, Victoria, whose perfect porcelain mask had finally cracked, revealing the raw greed and horror beneath. Then, I looked at Alex. My son. His face was a canvas of shame, regret, and a dawning, terrible understanding. An education isn't just about a diploma on the wall, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. My education taught me the value of integrity. It taught me that a man's worth is measured by his character, not by the labels others assign to him. My hands may be calloused, and my education may not be from a university, but these hands built this. I gestured with the blueprints, the tangible proof of my life's work. These hands built a life for my son. And they built his future, a future you were all so eager to embrace, while you simultaneously looked down on the man who created it. There was a dead silence in the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. I rolled the blueprints back up with deliberate, final motions and placed them, along with the deed, back into my briefcase, snapping it shut with a loud click that echoed in the stillness. I love you, Alex, I said, my voice softening for a moment, thick with the pain of 30 years. More than life itself. This was always for you. But love without respect is a hollow foundation. And a house built on a hollow foundation will not stand. I turned from the lectern, leaving the plans in the briefcase. So I think I'll reconsider this gift. Perhaps the funds for the clinic would be better served donated to a community that would appreciate where it came from. With that, I walked off the stage. Sarah was already on her feet, her eyes shining with tears and pride. I took her hand, and without looking back at the wreckage I had left behind, at the crying bride, the horrified groom, and the room full of gaping, judgmental faces, we walked out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, leaving them all in a stunned, silent tableau of their own making. For the first time, I felt free. The fallout was immediate and exactly as I had predicted. My phone began to vibrate incessantly before we had even reached the car. A barrage of texts and missed calls from Alex. The first messages were furious, laced with the frantic energy of a man whose perfect world had just been publicly detonated. How could you do this? You ruined my wedding. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed Victoria. The accusations were a desperate attempt to shift the blame, to make me the villain in his story. I didn't respond. I let him stew in the consequences of his own weakness. Sarah drove, her hand resting on my knee, a silent, powerful anchor in my emotional storm. A few hours later, the tone of the messages shifted. The anger bled into desperation. Dad, please call me. Victoria is a mess. Her parents are furious with me. We can fix this. Please, just talk to me. The wheel was telling. It was never about his failure to defend me, it was about the loss of the prize. Then came the calls from Victoria herself. The first one I answered out of a morbid curiosity. Her voice was thick with manufactured tears, a performance of contrition. Daniel, she sobbed, I am so sorry. It was a silly, horrible misunderstanding. The wedding planner, she must have mixed up the cards. It was a mistake. The lie was so blatant, so insulting, it was almost comical. She wasn't sorry for the disrespect, she was sorry she got caught. She was sorry the multi-million-dollar gift had been snatched from her grasp. She pleaded with me to reconsider, for Alex's sake, painting a picture of their devastated future. I listened patiently before I spoke. Victoria, I said calmly, the most offensive thing you've said to me all night is that you think I'm stupid enough to believe you. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked her number. Then I blocked Alex's. I needed space. I needed to breathe air that wasn't choked with their manipulation and entitlement. The next day, I got a call from an unexpected source, Victoria's aunt, Eleanor. She was the quiet one in the Henderson clan, a woman with kind eyes who had always seemed out of place among her pretentious relatives. "Daniel," she said, her voice warm, "I'm not calling to apologize on their behalf. I'm calling to say, good for you. They've had something like this coming for a very long time. What you did took courage." Her validation was a balm on a wound I didn't even know was still so raw. Supported by Sarah and my loyal work crew, who had been my true family for years, I held firm. I turned off my phone for a week and went back to my workshop. The familiar scent of cedar and the rhythm of my tools were my therapy. I wasn't just building furniture, I was rebuilding myself. In the weeks and months that followed, the consequences of that night began to ripple through Alex and Victoria's carefully constructed life. As Aunt Eleanor had discreetly informed me, they had been living far beyond their means, operating on the assumption of a massive financial windfall from me. They had a down payment on a luxury condo they couldn't afford and had taken out loans for a lifestyle designed to impress the Henderson social circle. Now, reality came crashing down. The Bank of Dad was officially and indefinitely closed. The Hendersons, deeply embarrassed by the public spectacle and furious that their daughter had married the son of a man who would defy them so spectacularly, offered little more than platitudes. Their support was as shallow as their values. Alex and Victoria were forced to confront the truth of their situation, stripped of the financial padding they had taken for granted. Their perfect facade crumbled under the weight of debt and resentment. While their drama unfolded from a distance, I began a journey of my own healing. The anger and hurt began to subside, replaced by a quiet sense of empowerment. I realized my self-worth had been tangled up for far too long in my son's approval and his perception of me. The wedding wasn't an attack on me, it was a mirror reflecting his own insecurities, insecurities that I had inadvertently funded but had not created. I took Sarah on a long-overdue vacation to Italy, a trip I had been putting off for years, always telling myself I needed to save for Alex. We walked through Florence, marveling at the work of Renaissance masters, and I felt a kinship with the artisans of centuries past. I wasn't low-educated, I was part of a long and noble tradition of creators and builders. I came back energized and with a renewed sense of purpose. I took the capital I had allocated for the clinic and the house and started a foundation to provide scholarships and tool grants for young people wanting to enter the skilled trades. I began volunteering at a local trade school, mentoring students, sharing the knowledge my hands had accumulated over a lifetime. I found a profound joy in it, a sense of legacy that was more meaningful than any building. I was no longer just building for my son, I was building for a generation of sons and daughters who, like me, would build the world with their own two hands. I was healing, piece by piece, by giving away the very thing my son had failed to value. About 6 months after the wedding, on a crisp autumn afternoon, I was in my workshop planing a piece of black walnut when I heard a hesitant knock on the open bay door. I looked up and my heart caught in my throat. It was Alex. He was standing there alone, silhouetted by the afternoon sun. He looked thinner, tired. The confident, slightly arrogant swagger he had acquired in the Henderson world was gone. In its place was the boy I remembered, the one who used to follow me around this very workshop, his eyes wide with wonder. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, taking in the familiar scent of sawdust and varnish. Finally, he looked at me, and his eyes were full of a sorrow so deep it was almost tangible. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking on the single word. Can I talk to you?" I switched off the planer, the sudden silence amplifying the tension in the air. I nodded towards a stool. He walked over and sat down, looking at his own hands, which seemed pale and soft compared to everything else in the room. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, and then the tears came. Not the crocodile tears of his wife, but the ragged, painful sobs of genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Dad. Not for the money. Not for the clinic. I'm sorry for what I let them do. For what I did." I was so caught up in that world, in what they thought was important, that I forgot what was actually important. "You." I was a coward. I heard what they called you, I saw what they were doing, and I didn't defend you. I was ashamed, and that shame makes me sick to my stomach. You spent your whole life building me up, and I let them tear you down in one night. He talked for a long time. He told me he and Victoria were in counseling, that the financial crisis had forced them to confront some ugly truths about their relationship and themselves. He didn't make excuses. He owned his weakness, his vanity, his profound failure as a son. I listened, without interruption. The anger I had held onto was gone, washed away by his raw, painful honesty. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could just flip, but for the first time, I saw a path toward it. When he was finished, I finally spoke. The relationship we had is over, Alex, I said quietly, and I saw fear flash in his eyes. It has to be. It was built on my sacrifice and your acceptance. If we're going to have a new one, it will be built on respect. Mutual respect. That's the only foundation that will last. I didn't offer him a hug. I didn't absolve him of his sins. It was too soon for that. But I did offer him a sliver of hope. I'm going for coffee next Saturday morning, I said. If you want to join me, I'll be at the old diner on Main Street at 8. He nodded, wiping his eyes, a look of profound relief on his face. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a reunion. But it was a start. A small, fragile, tentative beginning. In the year since that disastrous wedding, I've learned more about family, respect, and self-worth than I had in the 50 years prior. The journey has been a process of deconstruction and rebuilding, not with wood and nails, but with boundaries and honesty. My relationship with Alex is slowly, cautiously being put back together. We meet for coffee every Saturday. We don't talk about the Hendersons or Victoria very much. We talk about my work, about his patience, about the simple things. He asks me about my projects now with a genuine curiosity and a newfound respect in his eyes. He sees the artistry, not just the labor. He's learning to stand on his own 2 feet. I didn't just hand him a new future. Instead, when he and Victoria finally decided to start a small, modest practice in a less affluent neighborhood, I co-signed the loan. I didn't give him the fish, I am teaching him how to fish, a lesson he should have learned long ago. He is building something of his own now, and for the first time, I think he understands the pride and the pain that comes with it. My own life has been enriched in ways I never expected. My foundation has helped a dozen young apprentices get their start. My relationship with Sarah has deepened into a partnership of equals, built on a bedrock of mutual admiration. My crew, my chosen family, remains my steadfast support system. They were the ones who celebrated my victory, not with champagne and applause, but with a quiet barbecue in my backyard, where respect is unspoken because it is simply understood. I learned that the most valuable things we build are not for recognition from a world that judges by superficial standards. The true value lies in the integrity of the work itself, in the character it forges within us. My education wasn't low, it was deep. It was etched into my hands and my heart. The ultimate lesson is this: you must be the architect of your own self-worth. You cannot outsource its construction to your children, your family, or your peers. You must build it yourself, with the best materials you have, your character, your integrity, and your passion. And once you've built it, you must never, ever let anyone else put a price tag on it, or worse, a label. If my story has resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight for your own value against the people who should have seen it all along, I want you to share your own story of standing up for yourself in the comments below. Your story matters. It has value. Thank you for listening.